I'll let Corey take it away. Welcome, Corey.
Hey, Erica. Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here. I'm excited to talk to you today. Let me share my screen now. Let's see. So you should see the presentation. Yeah, cool. Okay. So again, Erica, thanks for introducing me, and thanks everybody for being here. So my name's Corey Fradin. I am the founder of a blog called Quick Boost. I do a few different things, but the big thing is I'm the founder of a blog called Quick Boost, where I write about things like productivity, time management, goal setting, ways to be intentional with your time. In addition to that, I also run a few different marketing agencies. In total, my work's been viewed about over 1 million times. I've been featured in places like Forbes and Entrepreneur, Thrive Global, Apple News, and more. Today, I'm really excited to talk to you about something that's really close to me, how to set goals, especially when you've come up short in the past, addressing kind of those things that the pitfalls that maybe you've run into in the past with goal setting, and maybe how you could do a better job moving forward. So to start, I'm going to talk about my 21st birthday. On my 21st birthday, this is just about a decade ago. So on my 21st birthday, I did the classic thing. I went out and went to all the bars and everything, had a good time, I guess. And the next day, on the day after my 21st birthday, as I was trying to go to sleep, it felt like my mind like broke. It felt like I was having a nervous breakdown, and I wasn't sure what was going on. It turns out there was a lot of different factors taking place. I was at a time when I was kind of transitioning between friends, so I was very lonely. I thought I had ADD, so I was taking prescribed like Adderall or Ritalin, one of the ADD medicines. I was starting a business, and that was very difficult. I had all these, and I was in school, and I was struggling, and I had all these different factors going on. And so what ended up happening, what I learned later, was that I actually had OCD. And so when I was taking all these medications and then piling everything on top of it with the loneliness and all that stuff, and actually I turned inward and started attacking my brain, basically. But all that to say, it was a time of hopelessness and a time where I felt totally lost and scared, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And it was frightening. And I mean, I didn't set out to set goals for this reason, but one of the nice benefits that I came across with goal setting was it allowed me to take control of my life and feel like I could start, I don't know, kind of working towards the light at the end of the tunnel. And so that was kind of my introduction into goal setting. And now I've been doing it for a long time. I write about it. I have a course on it. I have an ebook about it. My whole life kind of revolves around my goals. And so I'm really excited to now share with you kind of the big lessons or the big takeaways that I've learned from my experience with goals, and have been able to help others as well. But first, I think it's really important to talk about the misconceptions of goal setting, because when I talk about goals, more than likely, kind of like when you mention productivity or any of these buzzwords, there's probably like maybe a stereotype or I guess misconception that comes to mind. So the first one being that you must pursue vanity. A lot of people set goals like, I want to lose this much weight, or I want to put on this much muscle, I want to make this much money by the end of the month. That's not necessarily the case, though. When you start to pursue goals based on vanity, and I'll talk about this in a sec, it relies more on the ego than on what actually is fulfilling, and you're less likely to stick with it. So the first misconception is that you need to pursue things based on vanity, which just isn't true. And again, I'll talk about that in a sec. The second misconception is that the old way is best. And the old way being, I'm not sure if you're familiar with SMART goals, or aiming really high, as the song goes, aiming really high. So if you, what is it? Aiming for the moon. So if you fall, you land on the cloud or the star, whatever. Just these huge, ambitious things that aren't really realistic. These are the old ways of doing things. And from my own perspective, and from those I've spoken to, it's that strategy that has led us to coming up short or feeling frustrated and giving up on goal setting altogether. So the second misconception is the old way is best, when it's not. The old way, like I said, is structured, it's traditional, it's really good because it forces you to be ambitious, though it has many downsides in that you will often come up short because you're relying on things outside of your control, or things that are just not possible for you are currently. The new way is really flexible, it is adjustable, it is within your control, and it gives you the power to achieve your goals time and again, on repeat over and over. So let's dig into it. Just make sure, since I can see everybody, can you just let me know, can you hear me? Do like a cool. I just want to make sure I'm not having any tech stuff. Great. So lesson one, I was just touching on this with vanity. Focus on fulfillment over ego. What I found is that when you set goals based on fulfillment, you're more likely to stick with them as opposed to ones based on ego. And I'll give an example. Years ago, I wanted to get into golf. I really wanted to get into golf because my boss at the time really was into golf and I wanted to be buddies with my boss. And so I set this goal. I want to go golfing twice a month. So I would go to the driving range and I would play. And after about 2 months, I realized, oh, I hate this. I hate this, and I don't want to keep doing it. And the thing what I realized was I was setting this goal not based on this thing that I enjoyed, but to have someone like me, to maybe inflate myself or feel like I was a better person at my job or I was a better friend to my boss or a better employee, whatever. It was based on ego. And what happened was when the kind of the ego, when the kind of the ego, I guess, motivation kind of faded away, the desire to keep going with that goal faded away as well. And I eventually dropped it. Whereas I've had a goal for a while now to go on a date with my daughter every month. And we've been doing it, she's 2.5 now, but our first date was when she was 3 months old. So we've been doing it every month since then. And it's not always easy. You know, there's a lot of logistics involved with a baby and then a toddler, but we continue to go every single month because it's so fulfilling and so joy-filled. So with fulfillment, it allows you to stick with your goals through the challenging times. Where ego, you'll drop them. With fulfillment, you'll continue with them because they add so much meaning to your life. So in your business, in your travel adventures, focus on fulfillment. Not necessarily, I want to travel to 50 countries so that way you can say you travel to 50 countries, but setting a goal, I want to go to Italy within the next few months because whatever joy you would get out of going there for the food or whatever. Focus on fulfillment. The second lesson, set goals within your control. Set goals that you can control. A big one is, or maybe I should say, a goal that I've set so many times is I want to lose weight. I want to lose 10 pounds. I want to lose 20 pounds. And so I'll start working really hard at it. A couple weeks will go by, maybe actually a few days will go by. And then I stand on the scale, nothing moves, and then I quit. The reality is so many times we set goals for things that we have zero control over, and we may put in a ton of effort. We may put in a ton of work, but when things outside of our control happen, it makes us feel like we are less than or we're not doing a good job, and we end up dropping the goal altogether. Whereas let's say you set a goal to run a mile a week. Let's say you ran, or maybe 5 miles a week, however many miles you wanted to set. You set a goal to run a mile a week. You do it for a couple weeks, and maybe you're not losing the weight you wanted to lose, but you're putting in work, and you can say, wow, I actually ran 5 miles, I ran 10 miles or 20 miles. And so then you can always adjust it, but you have that confidence knowing I did this thing I said I was going to do, and I'm making progress in the right direction. When you set goals within your control, it gives you the responsibility. And that's a good thing because whether or not you do the work is all on you. My wife is annoyingly a very fast reader. She flies through books. And I remember one time we were sitting on a train going somewhere and I was like sitting reading my book, and like I'm a really slow reader. It's like we're the complete opposites. So I'm sitting there reading my book slowly, just one page at a time. And I hear her just flying through this book. And I'm so frustrated because like, it just feels like not in a jealousy kind of way, but more like, oh, like why, like how are you doing this? Like what am I doing wrong? All that to say, if I were to set a goal to read more pages than my wife in a given hour, I would feel frustrated and give up after that hour because maybe I would read 100 pages, but she would read 250. And it would be demoralizing when in reality, I read a ton of pages, like to read that much is insane. So that's a goal outside of your control. Whereas if you set a goal to read 2 books a month or to, book a flight by the end of the week, like these are things within your control that when you do them, whether or not you get the end result that you're hoping for, at least you can say, I did this thing I said I was going to do. And it gives you that motivation to continue forward. Control is very important. Prioritize sustainability. So lessons 3 and lesson 4 kind of go hand in hand, and I'll touch on both around the same time, but prioritize sustainability. So you see this a lot. I touch on weight loss because that's just such a common goal. Weight loss and making more money are like the 2 standard ones that people normally set. So a big one for sustainability is in January. You already know I'm going with this. A lot of people say I'm going to lose weight. This is the year. They start going to the gym. They go really hard. I've done this. Like it's not like an uncommon thing. We all do this. And so you see kind of 1 or 2 things happen. One, someone will either say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym for 4 hours and I'm going to do it every single day for the rest of my life. This is the year. Or they say, I'm going to do 2 days now. So I'm going to go for an hour in the morning, I'm going to go for an hour at night, and I'm just going to do that, and it's going to be great. What inevitably happens is after about a day and a half, it's way too hard, and most people, including myself, end up dropping it and quitting because what they put in place was just not sustainable. When you set goals that are sustainable, on the other hand, and I'll give some examples in just a moment, you will give yourself the ability to make long-term progress. You allow yourself to level up, you allow yourself to take your time and get there. So an example would be, actually, let me move on to lesson 4, because these, like I said, these two tie in together. So lesson 4 is ease into challenges. So easing into challenges is a great way to ensure sustainability. For example, when I first got into meditating, I don't meditate as much anymore, but for years I was really into it. And eventually I knew I wanted to meditate for 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. But that was just that amount of time sitting doing nothing felt insane. And I didn't know what I was going to do. And it was definitely not sustainable. I couldn't just sit down on a Monday and do that twice. I would never do it again. It would all collapse. And so what I decided to do was I decided I would ease into it. So I planned out that I would meditate for 1 minute in the morning and then 1 minute in the afternoon or evening. And then next week I would add on another minute. So 2 minutes and then 2 minutes. And then next week I'd add on another minute. So then 3 minutes and 3 minutes. I do that all the time with all of my goals that are really daunting. For example, let's say you wanted to do 100 push-ups. If you wanted to do 100 push-ups, which is super hard, it would be really difficult to just do it today. Not a lot of people can just do 100 push-ups in one sitting, and especially they couldn't do it like 3 days in a row or just continuously. But if you said today, I'm going to do 1 push-up, and then next week, I'm going to do 1 push-up every single day this week, and then next week, I'm going to do 2 push-ups, and then 3 push-ups, or I'll start with 5 and then do 10 and then 15. That's a very easy way to ease yourself into these big challenging goals and to jump back to prioritize sustainability at the same time. So to put it in terms of, let's say, travel or business, it might not be sustainable to say, I'm going to, I don't know, I'm going to hit these 3 cities. Like my goals, I want to hit these 3 cities in the next day. That might not be sustainable in the long term if you want to keep doing that from country to country or place to place or state to state. But if you say, okay, I want to spend, I don't know, this is kind of a weird example, I guess. But if I'm going to spend this time around, I'm going to spend, 1 day in this city, and then next time I'm back. That's a terrible example. Let me backtrack. Let me think of a better sustainability / easing into challenges goal for like travel.
Well, I can jump in
Yes,
there.
please.
You can say like, there's a lot of people that go to Europe and they're like, I want to see all of Europe.
Sure.
But you can go, and so then it feels like a very daunting thing because you're like, oh my God, I can't see all of Europe in just 3 weeks. So let me squeeze as much as I can in, when you can really just say, okay, let me pick like the top 3 places I want to go in the 3 weeks. And then I'll go back next time and I'll probably have a better understanding my second trip of what Europe is going to be like. So that would probably work with this lesson 3 and 4. These are great tips, by the way.
That's a great example. That's a really good example. And then to put it in terms of business too, like let's say as a blogger or writer, a lot of times we feel the need to, or even just any person creating content or putting anything out there, you feel the need to be constantly putting stuff out. And so if you were to say, I'm going to write 1,000 words, 2,000 words today, again, you may burn out really quickly. But if you say, okay, today I'm just going to write 50 words, and then tomorrow 50 words, and then the next day 50 words, and then the next week I'm going to add on a little bit more, and then a little bit more. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where you are writing a good amount. You can write an article a day, multiple articles a day. You can ease yourself into these more challenging things. Again, easing into your goals gives you time to learn and grow with the goal. So back to the push-up example, which is actually something I've done and I'm doing currently, is, wait, we don't have to get into that, but just to show that this does work because I'm doing it right now. To go back to the push-up example, is when you start at, let's say, 1 push-up for the week or 5 push-ups, it gives you time to look at your form and figure out, okay, where am I sore? And am I sore in the right places? Am I doing this correctly? Let me look at some videos. And then when you add on the next week, you can then continue to learn and improve and iterate. Whereas if you just go 100% at the beginning, you're going to be doing so much and your time is going to be so stretched that you're not going to be able to really take give yourself a chance to work into it and figure out the right ways to be doing things. So easing into your goals is very powerful, and it encourages sustainability in the long term. Lesson 5, make adjustments as much as you want. I don't know about you, it could be my OCD that I was talking about, or it could be like anxiety stuff. I tend to be very rigid, or at least I used to be very rigid about the goals I set. So if I set a goal to, it doesn't matter, do anything. And then if I didn't do it or I didn't want to do it, I would just beat myself up. I would talk poorly on talk poorly to myself, the whole thing. And what I realized after just completely just beating myself up all the time is, oh yeah, I can make adjustments as much as I want. Like, as long as you are putting in the work. There's a difference between putting in the work and needing to make an adjustment and not putting in the work and needing to make an adjustment. There's a difference between I'm doing this thing and something needs to change versus I'm not doing this thing. So maybe if I make a change, I'll be doing better. All that to say, when you make adjustments, it gives you room to learn and improve. So let's say back to the exercise example, or we can do travel or business. I'll hit all three. So for exercise, let's say you're doing those push-ups or you're running a mile a week and you realize, oh, you know what, I'm doing this, but it's causing me to have, shoulder pain or knee pain, or I'm not, it's not giving me the results I want, but you're doing the work. And so you can still be proud of what you've done and say, oh, you know what, instead of push-ups, maybe I'll do squats, or instead of running, maybe I'll go for a swim, or you can try something else. Instead of, let's say, travel, maybe you say, like, my goal is to take, I don't know, local, like, public transit. Oh, Erica, you have an example?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, your goal is to do it as budget as possible, and all of a sudden you realize, like, okay, this isn't fun for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you say, maybe I'll like go to a hotel tonight or something like that. Or the opposite, maybe you booked a bunch of hotels because you were scared to, like, I don't know, stay in a hostel, and then you meet a bunch of people at a hostel and you're like, you know what, I sort of want to try that. Or you realize that Ubers are expensive in other countries and you're like, I think I just want to take the bus for $1, And so, yeah, I think that's especially true on the road. And I think it's one of the things that we love to share about, that like you can just sort of book minimally so that you can make adjustments as you go, as you feel comfortable, as like where you are on the road, and sort of plan as you go. So I think a lot of people in our community are in that camp of like, okay, like I'm not gonna book everything to the T. I'm gonna let some stuff just like organically come up. Yeah.
Totally. And also giving yourself space to do that, like not feeling so rigid that I said I was going to do these 20 things, now I need to do them, knowing like, oh, I'm learning, I'm doing what I said I was going to do, but I'm learning that maybe this isn't my preference, so maybe I can adjust. And even in terms of business, back to let's say you publish a lot on Pinterest and you want to create 10 new pins a day, but you're realizing, and you've been doing it for a couple of days and you realize, oh, this isn't sustainable. You can adjust it. You can say, okay, I'm going to try 1 pin a day, or I'll try 5 pins a day, whatever. You have room to adjust as you learn and improve. And you should really lean on that because it gives you the ability to take a step forward in a really positive way instead of getting demoralized. Step 6, or lesson 6, know when you will do the work. I am guilty of this. I'm guilty of all of these things, not in this case, not knowing when I'll do the work. I think a lot of us will set a goal because it seems really exciting in the moment, and I don't know how you tend to set it. Now, what I do is I use a goal tracker, like a Google Doc where I write them all down. But I think it's very common for people to just kind of announce it to the world, maybe their spouse, or they just, I don't know, they just say to themselves, like, I'm going to do this thing. And then they don't necessarily make time for it in their day. They don't plan it out when it'll happen. And so maybe they remember for the first few days, but after that, they tend to forget, or work gets busy, or maybe they set it on a Saturday and then the kids come in and then everything gets kind of crazy. And then Monday rolls around and then you just lose track of it. So the big key here is knowing when you'll do the work. You don't necessarily need to plan out your day, although I've found in my experience that it is very helpful to do that and then to fit in specifically when you'll work on that goal. But it could just be a matter of setting a reminder or putting a note on your laptop and knowing, okay, at this time, I'm going to do this thing. Because when you make room for it in your day, when you know when you'll do it, you will make room for it in your day. You won't just let it like slip to the side. You won't forget about it. You will make sure that it gets prioritized in what you're doing. So for example, let's say your day is jammed with meetings, but you want to prioritize Pinterest. Back to the Pinterest example, it's saying, okay, I'm looking at my day. I know I have a 20-minute break from 9 to 9:20 in here. I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna schedule myself to do my Pinterest pins now. Or okay, I know I don't have a ton of time between like 5 and 6, but I'm gonna go for a run at this time. I'm gonna write this down, go for a run between 5 and 6 after this meeting and before dinner, whatever. Plan for it and write it down so that you know specifically when you're going to do it. And then from there, go about actually doing the work when the time comes. To recap, so focus your goals on fulfillment over ego. Feel your goal should be motivating and meaningful. And I should say, back to motivation does fade with time, but that fulfillment will stay. It'll give you that reason to kind of get out of bed, to, it'll give you that joy when things are going well. It'll give you that purpose when things are going not so well. Focus on fulfillment, and you're much more likely to stick with your goals in the long term. And it's not only that, but it's also kind of a good North Star. Like if this goal is not giving you fulfillment, then maybe it means you need to adjust something. Next, focus on goals that you can control. You can't always control your goals, but the ones that you can control, you have a much higher rate of success, especially if you're the type that does what they say they're going to do, if you're really driven and you put in the work, which I'm assuming people watching this video probably are. And so when you give yourself control, when you take control of your goals, you give yourself the ability to achieve it time and again. So whether that means I'm going to read 2 books a month, or I'm going to run 1 mile a day, or I'm going to reach out to 50 new clients this week, whatever you want to do, setting a goal within your control. And back to that client example, you're not saying I'm going to close 50 new clients. It's I'm going to reach out to 50 new clients, because you have no control over what that person does. All you can do is what you can do. And in this case, it'd be cold emailing or cold calling or whatever you're going to do. But focusing on what you can control. And then if you're not getting the results you want, then you can adjust, but knowing that you did everything that you could. You did what you said you were going to do. And that's really powerful. Focus on sustainability and ease into those more challenging goals. Ask yourself, is this sustainable a week from now, 2 weeks from now? Can I keep going with this? And if it's not, if it's too audacious, maybe you can ease into it, start small and slowly build. And as you build, feel free to adjust. Maybe you realize, okay, I'm going in this direction, but I really need to be going over here. So you just kind of tweak things. For example, I'm writing a blog a day, and I've kind of been working up to that for however many months now. And now I'm doing it and it's great, but it's not getting me the business results I want. So maybe I can tweak it and maybe write a LinkedIn post a day or do something on Twitter or whatever. You can adjust things. And finally, know when you're going to do a plan for it. So that way, when the time comes, you know exactly what you're going to be doing, why you're going to be doing it. And then it's just a matter of doing the work, which it sounds like you're already going to do based on this community. Finally, I guess second to finally, start now. I used to set goals. The only time I used to set goals it used to be January. I would only ever set goals in January. On the first Monday of the year would be all my goals for the year. That's when I would do everything. And so what would happen is, like in February, if I had an idea for a new goal or I wanted to do something else, I would just write it down and wait until January the next year. But that's insane, because if you think about it, you miss out on, if it's fulfilling, you miss out on all that potential fulfillment. If it's something you're going to be learning about, you're missing out on all that potential learning. So start now. There's no reason you can't get into it right now in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week. You can do it right now. I will say, I will often, if I do want to start a new goal, I'll write it down and maybe sleep on it for a week before starting now, just to kind of make sure it's not, to kind of vet it, to kind of sleep on it and realize, okay, do I need to work my way into it, or is this something I still want to do? But the gist is, don't wait for too long, just get started. And then keep going. You will hit hard points, you will hit difficult times. It's a matter of practicing resilience, and whether that is reading biographies or listening to motivational podcasts or YouTube, whatever. The goals, while fulfilling, will have ups and downs. And so then it's a matter of just keep putting one step in front of the other, keep going, keep trying. Just resilience is so important. And I'm just trying to think if I was going to start recommending just a handful of books, but that's super unnecessary right now. All that to say, just keep going. You can always look at like motivational books or YouTube quotes, whatever. But there will definitely be, like I said, ups and downs, difficult times. It's just a matter of keep putting one step in front of the other. That's it. Thank you very much for listening. If you're interested in this topic of goal setting, goal success, you can scan this QR code. It'll give you access to download my free ebook, which is kind of talking about more on this. I also have a course, like I said. Feel free to email me, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. And thank you for listening.
Whoop, whoop. That was amazing. All right, I have lots of questions. Cool. If you guys have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat, and we can get them answered. Honestly, if you guys want to unmute yourself and ask them, we can also do that. I see one coming through from Jordan, but I'm going to ask my question first. I have a question on prioritizing goals. So like, I have a lot of goals and I also have a lot of ideas, and I don't know if those are the same things. But I feel like, to me, whatever is on my mind somehow gets top priority. So like, how do you actually organize your goals in a way that like makes you able to achieve them, instead of just like working on stuff for a little bit and then working on the next one for a little bit and then never really like crossing anything off or completing anything, which is, I feel like, my biggest hurdle.
Totally. That's a really good question. And yeah, that's a super, and I've struggled with that as well. There's a lot of different approaches that you could take or that I take. If you think it's going to be let's say a big business change, like if you're going this way for your business and you say, I want to now go this way, I'll often sleep on it. I'll talk to people that I trust, like their business sense or whatever. I'll ask for someone that knows what they're talking about and I'll kind of get their feedback and decide. And then if it's a matter of switching, then I'll just kind of cut it and move. If it's more matter of, okay, I want to, run this much and I want to spend this much time with my daughter every day and I want to read this many books. If it's just a matter of having a ton to do, it could just be, well, the easiest thing is probably to pick one and then just do it for like a week and then add on the next one and then do that for a week and then just start stacking them on top. Like, for example, I have, I think 15 or 16 goals, but I didn't start with 15 or 16 goals. I have them now, but I added them on as I got more and more comfortable. And not only that, but I also am a big fan of habit goals. I didn't touch on this in my talk, but there's really two types of goals. There's achievement goals and habit goals. Habit goals are, well, I'll start with achievement goals. Achievement goals are one-time things. So they're saying, I'm going to run a marathon I'm going to run a marathon 2 months from now. And it's great because once you reach your goal, you achieve it. The downside to that is once it's done, it's done. You're no longer a runner. You are someone that you ran a marathon, you become past tense, where a habit goal is, I'm going to run a mile a week. It may not give you that deadline of a marathon in 2 months, but it's something repetitive that you will do every day or every 3 or 4 days, and it becomes part of your identity. You're no longer someone that ran, you are a runner. And so for many of my goals, to circle back to your question, I'll treat them as habit goals. And that way I can chip away at everything slowly, but throughout the month, and then have a ton of progress left over. So a lot of the examples I gave in this talk were real goals that I have. So like the going on a date with my daughter, or reading 2 books a month, or I have so many, I don't even know, like, oh, go to the beach twice a month. Like a lot of my goals are habit goals, or spend 5 minutes every day learning Japanese. Like I do little bite-sized chunks, and then I fit them into my day. So another big part is, and I know this is just like a long rambly answer, and I'm sorry, but it's such a big question. Another part is kind of going back to planning out your day. So if you say, okay, I only have 30 minutes, I only have literally 30 minutes of free time, and I have 15 goals I want to do in this time, you're going to have to decide, back to priorities, which one resonates with you the most. And maybe that's writing them down and listing them, and then waiting a couple of days and seeing which one really feels like this is going to be the most fulfilling, or this one seems to be the loudest or the most like needing a priority. You could do that, or you could just shrink them all down and do a minute of each of them a day. There's a lot of different ways you can play it, and hopefully one of those works for you.
Yeah, that's great. I would love to hear from the people that are on the chat. Like, if you want to write down your achievement goals versus habit goals as it pertains to like maybe travel. I think that's a really good point. And I love that you said that once you've run a marathon, you're a person that has ran a marathon. You're not somebody that's like still training for a marathon. And I think that in the travel realm, there's a lot of those sort of pitfalls. I know in the years that I've been working with Nomadic Matt, I never thought I would ever meet somebody that that traveled to every country in the world, but now I've met a handful of them, and it really does seem like they're on a mission. They have a goal, and then at the end they're like, what next? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because there have been people that have solved this problem, and they've actually broken up countries into other things. So there's so many different parts of Russia that you can go to, right? For instance, not necessarily
right now,
city, but there's so many different regions. So they actually like, or if you've gone to the Philippines, chances are you haven't been to every single island in the Philippines. So like they've broken it down so much further than just like, have I been to this country? But it's interesting because it is like a very goal-oriented thing, and they solved that problem. And I don't think many people have gone to every like part of the world when they've broken it down. So it's something that like, yeah, people continue to do.
One to that point, one thing one goal you could set is, let's say if you didn't like the idea of traveling to every country because you didn't like the idea of being done at some point, running out of countries to go to, you could rephrase it as, I want to explore something new every day or every week, whatever. And as long as you're going somewhere new or somewhere you haven't been, really you can just keep going forever. Especially if you're like a digital nomad or you're traveling a lot, like there's always something new to explore. And so that might be a way to kind of keep that traveler, like, and you'll probably end up hitting all the countries in that way, but kind of more indirectly in saying, okay, I'm going to go to like Florence, and then I'm going to go to, I don't know, Venice. And although it's all Italy, like I'm still exploring and going somewhere new.
Yeah, I love that. I feel like context is everything when it comes to anything, and especially goals and travels and things like that, because there's always something to explore. If you've been to Spain for a week, a year, 10 years, there's still more to see. So that's wonderful. Okay, we have a question from, let's do Casey's. Casey, would you like to unmute yourself?
I can do that. Hello. So I'm in the process of starting a business, and there are a lot of different things to consider. There's a lot of social media and the art side for me, and blogging, and, et cetera, et cetera. How is it like, do you have any tips for keeping all of those straight in my mind, in person, et cetera, et cetera?
Yes. First of all, how much time each day do you have to work on it?
It's a full-time thing.
Okay. Oh, cool. So you have time.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'll like kind of chip away at the question. I'll work my way into the center.
Okay.
For the things that you want to do someday, but they're like driving you crazy because they're in your mind, but they're not like you need to do them now. I have a Google Doc. I got this from the Getting Things Done book by David Allen, just called Someday Maybe. And I'll just put all my ideas that maybe someday I'll get around to, and I just put them all there. So that way I get them out of my mind onto paper. And then maybe every quarter I'll revisit that doc and say, okay, do I want to tackle any of these? That's an easy way to do that. And then as far as figure out, right, and you said, are you trying to figure out kind of what your main focus should be, or kind of how to kind of keep track of everything?
Kind of keep track of everything, because it's all kind of priority right now, So
yes, I do. The early days of like starting anything is like just madness for a
Yeah.
while. And then eventually, once you get everything worked out, then it's like, then you can just focus on the one or two things. But in the beginning, it's all just kind of chaos. And deciding what is more important is difficult. So I completely understand you there. Let me think. I wonder if it could be a matter of, and okay, I mean, it could just be a matter of, there's a lot of different ways you could play it. You could break out your day in terms of like, okay, I have 8 hours. I'm going to spend 2 hours each day on each different aspect. So marketing or accounting or admin, you can do that kind of stuff. You could figure out what is the biggest, most important part of my business, and I'm going to make sure I get that done every single day, and everything else will get done eventually. So let's say you want to start bringing clients now. It could be, I want to reach out, like I said earlier, like I want to reach out to 50 or 100 people today, and I'm going to do that every single day. And once that's done, then you can worry about getting your posting on Instagram or doing whatever, but making sure that the biggest thing is getting addressed.
Okay.
What else? Am I getting close to?
Yes, that helps a lot. I like the thought of not the one of dedicating like 2 hours specifically in a day, but like focusing more on like what exactly is going to get me further in the business. I think I'm interpreting that correctly.
Yeah.
So the majority of my business right now, it's an online Shopify store. So the majority of it is going to be, I think right now, just, from being here for 5 minutes, is my drawings and trying to get those on products and things like that. So really like dedicating a big chunk of my time, maybe like early in the morning, doing specifically drawing things, and then like maybe later on, as my brain fizzles out through the day, kind of dedicate a little bit of time sporadically to a few other things, and then work on them as I can.
I mean, I don't want to, Erica, I don't want to prioritize the conversation on this, but I also have a ton of questions for you about the business, which may help others. Where do I want to start? Okay, for the business, have you thought about marketing at all, like in terms of how you're going to get customers?
Yeah, I've run a few Facebook ads that haven't done well. So that was like the main thing that kind of triggered me into thinking I need to focus on something else. So I ran Facebook ads. I want to do Instagram ads. I want to do like SEO. There's a blog I want to start in there. So I want to try and get SEO in there. And collaborations. And those are the main ones that I think I'm going to focus on right now.
Okay, cool. Goes to anyone. I have a friend, her name's Natalie Bardo, who does really well on Pinterest. And so Pinterest might be, depending on what your Shopify store is, that might be something you want to check out, is like doing, in my early days of blogging, I was a lot on QuickBooks, which is the name of my blog. I was a lot on Pinterest, and there's definitely a huge space there depending on what you're doing. So that might be a big priority too, is like figuring out the marketing side first. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying there's a lot of different facets, so I understand.
The marketing aspect of it is definitely a huge thing, and it's proven to be a lot more than I expected. So it's definitely going to be a lot longer than I expected to really get that under control. Pinterest was definitely on my list of things beforehand, and I actually had like a meeting with one of their marketing experts and things. And it just proved to be just a little too much, because I decided that Facebook and Instagram were more kind of where my audience was going to be, I think. So I kind of decided to focus on them. But Pinterest is definitely on the someday maybe list that you talked about.
Perfect. So
well,
it sounds like you know what the big thing is then. Yeah, so I would say, okay, here's my big thing that I want to do. Until this gets done every day, I'm not going to worry about everything else.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's what I think that's a good place to start.
Okay, that's great. I like that. Thank you so much.
I'm gonna stop sharing my screen now.
I love that. do the one thing first. I read that book. The one thing.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, we have some other questions. I'm gonna ask you first if you want to unmute yourself. So we have a question from Hoda. Do you want to unmute yourself, or would you like me to ask it? Hoda?
I can unmute myself.
Go ahead.
So my question was, do you have a process, or do you set any time aside for reviewing and reflecting on your goals? So that's sort of like a part one. And then also, how do you acknowledge or celebrate your achieved goals?
Okay, both super good questions. Okay, as far as the reflection goes, I used to do reflection. I tend to talk to myself a lot, and I work from home. I'm kind of isolated by myself most of the time. So I generally am reflecting all the time in real time. It's not the most structured thing, and I know that. But I will sometimes, if a thought is really digging into me, then I'll like journal it, or I'll go for a run and kind of think about it. So to answer your question, I don't make specific time to reflect, although there is a lot of value in that. Things you could do are, you could sit down every month, and these are all things I've tried. It's just a preference kind of thing. You can make a calendar event or a reminder to sit down every month and kind of look through your goals and say, are these still resonating with me? Yes or no? And if they're not, what can I adjust? You could do that. You could do it every quarter or every year. You could do it every January, as opposed to setting goals, which you can do all the time, but you can reflect at certain periods. And then as far as celebrating goes, it's weird. I don't celebrate my goals that much, but I think that's because my goals, 99% of my goals are habit goals, and they're based on fulfillment. So the actual doing of the goal is the part that I enjoy. So while it's cool to, let's say at the end of the year, like, oh, I read this many books, I don't really care that much about it, because it's the actual doing of the thing that feels really good, if that makes sense. I kind of phrase that like a question, but there was a period at the end of that.
It does. I mean, what are you gonna say? I did 52 dates with my daughter this year. Like,
yeah, exactly. Like the going on the date is the fun part, is the thing to celebrate. So I guess if anything, what you could do is instead say, like, when you're reflecting, you can say, wow, like I did this stuff throughout the year. Like, look at me, I'm awesome. And you can use that as motivation to set even bigger goals, or just, bolster your confidence moving forward.
I do think that if we related this to travel, a really cool thing that I've always had on my mind to do is to put everything in like something like TripIt, where they'll tell you like how many miles you've gone, how many
Oh,
cities
cool.
you've been to, how many nights you've stayed at a hotel. Like I know people that religiously use some sort of like tracker, not necessarily to say like, woohoo, I did 2000 mile or whatever, but sort of just to look at every once in a while and be like, you know what? Wow. Like, wow.
Yeah, good for
Look
me.
at
Yeah,
me.
totally.
I'm just one little human and I got to all these places in the last few years. So it's something I've been thinking about, like as my son, we're taking him on his 15th flight soon, and he's only 1.5. And so I was thinking like, wow, I have a fresh baby. I could probably like start recording this. Like, I don't know how many flights I've been on, hundreds. It would be so cool to know like where, when, and all that sort of stuff. So I don't know if any of you are new travelers, like this could be like the best part about being a new traveler is like you could have that from the beginning. But I
Speaking
love,
of, oh, sorry,
yeah.
Erica, sorry to interject. Speaking of reflection too, though, you give me a great idea. Like when it's different when you're flying with a kid, and I totally recognize that. If you're not flying with a kid and you're on a plane, like that's a great time to put on some music and reflect. And especially if you're traveling a lot, to really say, wow, like I'm flying all these places, I'm doing all this cool stuff, or look at all these great things I do. So um, you could always make time for it during the kind of those random moments too, on the
Yeah.
bus or the subway, whatever.
Or you could do it the way that most people do it on social media, which is they do it the day before the last day of the year and just like write down all the places they've been and all the things that they've done. And then you have a catalog of all the things.
Sure.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Farha, would you like to ask your question? Or I can for you if you don't want to unmute yourself.
Hi,
Yeah.
sure, I can go ahead and ask. Yeah, so I was curious about like, if you've been working on a goal and you've not gotten the results in the form that you were expecting, how do you decide between, okay, I probably need to like tweak strategy and, keep going more down this path versus like maybe, it's time for me to let go of this goal and maybe find something else that's probably more at the essence of what I was going for. So just sort of, I think the flipping of the question from what like Erica asked earlier, where it's like, sometimes like you might get too attached to a goal and then it's like, oh, like now I don't want to quit this because, I'm not a quitter.
Yes. Yeah.
Like because we have that negative connotation with quitting. So I was just curious about what your process is about that.
That's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question, and it's like the sunk cost fallacy. Like I put in all this time, and I want to keep going because I put in this time, so I'll keep going and putting in more time, and then you just end up spiraling out. It's tough. I mean, it is. That's why it's such a good question. It's very tough to know. Not only to know, okay, I'm doing this thing and it's not working, and I need to do something different. Like that's really tough. I think like in my own life, I've been doing my blog for the last like 4 years, and I was just on paternity leave for the last couple months, and I had a lot of time to think, and not a lot of time to think. I had random pockets to think in between not sleeping, and I had random times to think and journal and whatever. And I realized I'd been working on my blog diligently for the last 4.5 years, and it wasn't moving the way I wanted it to, and what I would do instead. And I think it might just go back to the previous question of just making time to actually sit down and I'm a writer. I write a lot, and I've been leaning more and more on this lately. Is just like on my phone, like a note or a Google Doc, just kind of almost venting to myself. I kind of see it as like if you turn on the faucet and like brown water's coming out, just letting it run until it runs clean. So just writing as much, just getting it all onto the paper until things start to make sense. And you could do this over a period of days or weeks. Like for my blog, I did this over like 3 weeks. I just was writing down kind of little snippets until I realized, okay, I think here's the new direction I want to take. That's for the big things. So for the big things, especially the ones you've been doing for a long time, that's what I've been doing. For the little things, you kind of know if you're keeping track of your goals and you're just consistently not hitting them, that's a great sign. You maybe need to downshift or make an adjustment. If you are hitting them, but you're not getting the results. So let's say, like, I don't know, let's say you want to book a flight by, well, I feel like that's so straightforward, but let's say you want to book a flight by the end of the week and you just don't, that goes back to that previous example. You could just maybe switch it and say, I'm going to book it once a month or every quarter. But if it comes down to like weight loss and you say, I'm going to run a mile a day to hopefully lose weight, and then after a month you've run all these miles, but you haven't lost weight, then you get kind of discouraged. You're proud of what you've done, but you realize I need to make a change. And so I think that's kind of a good opportunity to like, to just check in every once in a while. Like I said, I kind of just do it sporadically, but you can totally do it once a month or once a quarter, whatever, and check in to see not only is it fulfilling and feeling good, but am I getting where I want to go? But it's tough. I think it's more of an art than a science. I don't have a great answer for you on it because I'm still trying to work through that on my own.
No, thank you so much. And I love the water analogy. And I think just sort of letting that, like processing that decision over like multiple days, especially for the big stuff that you mentioned. So I'm totally gonna try that.
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank
it's a really
you.
good question. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I always joke with Nomadic Matt that every time he goes away and is like away from his work, so like when he goes to the desert or like somewhere where there's no internet, he always comes back with all the ideas of how to change something and like a whole new. So like after Christmas, I know it's like the New Year time, but it's really because that 1 week we have off, like that first meeting of the year, it's always like, okay, we're restructuring everything. And now it's become just a huge joke because when you're like in the middle of it, when you're in the mud of it, you can't see, you just keep doing the things to like keep it going. But when you have like some distance from at least the day-to-day actions, you can like like reassess if it's what you actually want to be doing. And the way that you were talking about time, I also feel like that's something that I tell a lot of people that are in relationships. It's like, you've put all this time into this relationship, and time is the thing that's gonna like be the thing that actually carries it through, or the thing that ends it, right? You just keep putting time into a relationship and you're like, oh, but we've been together for 3 years, so might as well stay together. And then like 4 years go by and you're like, well, we've been together for 4 years. And at some point, if it's not going in the direction you want it to go, it's like, all right, next one, right?
Well, you made a really good point though, like to put it in terms of business, like it's really hard to be working on the business day in and day out and also be reflecting on it in real time. It's like, because like if your day is already maxed out, if you already have 1,000 things going on, like setting time aside to now reflect on if those things are the right things to do, like that's very difficult. So it might just require a good amount of intention to say, okay, every evening for 15 minutes, I'm just going to vent onto this piece of paper until, like I said, until like the water runs clear and I can kind of get heads or tails of what's going on here. But it's hard. It's super hard to like make the time for it, especially when you're so in the mix.
Yeah.
But I think it's just a matter of, setting some time aside whenever you can find it to reflect.
I mean, I think just the mere topic of this conversation, which is goal setting, is something that a lot of people don't do, right? They just start, okay, I'm going to start a business, and then there's no goal to it. It's just like, I'm going to start the business and I'm going to do all the things that need to be done. It's not like I want to start this business to do this so that I can do that, whatever. And then there's like clear directions. It's just like, what do people do to start a business? And then you start doing everything, right? So if we're at least thinking about goals, I feel like we're heading in a good direction, right?
Yeah, totally. And to bring it back to relationships too, like I think a lot of times, or maybe you could do it in terms of business, you can do it in terms of anything. I think sometimes we know like at a gut level if something is working or not. But in my opinion, that's not the hard part. The hard part is figuring out what to do with that information. So, okay, my business isn't working. Do I like close the business, or do I just change my strategy? Do I bring on a coach? Like there's 1,000 different options, and coming to that resolution is much more difficult. And I think that's really where the journaling becomes really helpful, which I'm trying to do a lot more of.
Yeah, I think that one of Matt's most popular blog posts of all times is about it's okay to go home, because we do a lot of long-term traveling, or like we write a lot about long-term traveling, and Matt was on the road for years and years. And it's not failure if you go home, it's just you're choosing something different. And so a lot of times, like, you feel super bad about that because you feel very lucky to be on a trip. And if you're like just slogging through it, like what's the point? Like, might as well do something that lights you up each day. You don't know how many days you have on this earth.
Yeah.
I did drop this book that I just read. I don't know if you've read it yet, Corey, but it's super popular just now. I think it came out because it talks a lot about the pandemic, but 4,000 Weeks, Time Management for Mortals. It's like Matt's favorite book. So I just read it too. And I'm just like, I'm on my second reading of it right now because I'm like, I didn't get everything and I loved it so much. But it's basically like this talk in a nutshell. But like what you're talking about habits